notes in the text section, we also indicate that there is some sense of
I don't know, is
order.
it?
Yeah, it's recording.
But we also ask that when you're not speaking, that you mute your microphone. And so that ensures that the background noise doesn't disturb the rest of the conversation. If there are issues,
I have to
technical
you have to
issues,
stop the recording and then
AUT
say
has their
before,
IT
I might call
support
you.
on standby.
Yeah.
And again, you can just
Okay.
indicate and we'll be following the text as well and try to address it accordingly. You're also aware that this is being recorded like the first session so that you'll have access to the information afterwards, which will be posted on the website. So again, returning to the agenda, apart from discussing the two topics that we have there, we go into a brief overview of the upcoming ERA conference in April 2020, and of course the CRM conference in September 2020. And there's an opportunity at the end if there's any other business or anything else that you'd want to pose to this group, there is that opportunity as well. So if I am not sure if we have covered all the technical stuff and so on, I'll not ask that we do a brief round of introduction. So as you know already, I'm Shakisha. I'm here in Jamaica. You've heard my voice before, so I won't labor any further. I'll hand over. I'm not sure in what order. Margaret spoke before. She's next beside me in the video, which I'm seeing. How about you, Valerie? Can you go next?
Yes. Hi, Shakisha. Hi, everyone. I'm not seeing Saran, so she isn't on yet. Unfortunately, I'm in Trinidad. So that's it. I think all of us know each other. Veronica, hi. If you're there, good to see you. Joyanne, hi. Annabelle, hi. Susan, hi.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi. So I think I am seeing everybody. I'm hearing everybody. So I'm gonna mute now.
Okay. Who's next? Annabelle, you go.
Nice. So I'm Anna. I am a PhD student and I work with Camille at AUT, and I am on a bus and I can show you some beautiful New Zealand scenery that I can see through my window. Hold on. There you go. Say hi to New Zealand. Welcome everyone. Great to see you again. And I'm also hoping for a very, very good discussion. Looking forward to it. I'm going to have my video off unless I'm speaking so that I can save some battery and I don't have to like fall off in the middle of the conversation. But great to see you all.
Great, Anna. Thank you. Veronica? Are you here, Veronica? All right, let's come back to Veronica. Joyanne, you're next.
Hi all, hi colleagues, former colleagues, nice to see everybody. I am in Belize and I'm still at my office. I had hoped to go home, but you know, one thing after the other. So I'm in my office in Belize, and it's just so remarkable that we are so many years later still working together, scattered across the globe. So fantastic. Looking forward to the meeting.
Thank you. Veronica, I see you're back with us.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. Happy to see everyone. Nothing new to report. So I'm just happy to be here. So let's get started.
Great. And Camille?
Kia Tufano, Camille here. Good to see you guys again.
Thank you. Suzanne, are you here?
Yes, hi everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm in Trinidad and Tobago. I haven't really worked with many of you, but I look forward to this meeting as well. So thank you for organizing it. Great.
Thank you. All right, welcome family. Let's open the forum for discussion. So now I hand back over to Margaret.
Margaret, unmute. Unmute.
Well, while Margaret does that, can I just follow the agenda then and hand over to you, Camille, and you just give an overview?
Okay, Margaret, talk now.
I know, Shakisha, you were going to, well, you did all the introductions, and so I was just going to say that Camille is due to give an overview of what we're doing before I bring in the themes for discussion. So Camille, over to you, as regards the overview, and I think Veronica, you need to mute a little bit. Some sound picking up there. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Well, what we have so far, just overview, is Anna has added quite a bit to the website. Videos, we've also added some work from someone in Guyana, and we've had now, I think, maybe 4 publications. The last one accepted by the Journal of Education Development in the Caribbean. So 4 publications in Lyman and Old Talk so far, and 1 on the way in conjunction with a colleague in Australia on sharing practices and the sharing of knowledge to come out in the Peabody Journal of Education at Vanderbilt University. So yeah, that's what we are now, and I've put the agenda up to share with everybody so you can see it. So I'm just going to go back on that. Yeah. I'm good, Margaret.
Okay. All right. So I want to jump right into it because I know the time constraints for a lot of people. And as on the agenda, the first thing we have up is colonial language affirming methodology in Caribbean research. Now, I know we had put up a little blurb there, but I want us in the discussion of this to think of 2 things, especially. First of all, Frantz Fanon has argued that language is a technology of power. His statement highlights the role of power in the choice of language that is used by researchers. So I want us to examine that kind of concept, language as a technology of power, especially as we move forward in decolonizing our research. And secondly, a nice statement by Age Kum from Ghana, a Ghanaian researcher who has said that language is seen as linguistic imperialism, and therefore the importance of decolonization of language. And in that, he says that it involves 3 things he posed for that, and we will discuss around that. So the first thing is language as a technology of power, and the second concept, the linguistic imperialism that continues to exist. And linguistic imperialism just suggests that there's the bargaining power of the dominant language that we continue to use in our research, and that bargaining power continues to have that kind of socio-economic effect on the society. So if we can generate the discussion on that. I know you had seen the blurb about language and so, and this is a concept that we would like to address. So who would like to open the discussion on those areas? Let me put on my glasses.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, interesting, in the blurb, the spelling of Lyman, Lyming, to me really highlights its use of wrong language and how we represent even the language that we speak. I don't know, are you all seeing that? Lyman, is that the spelling that you're using? I mean,
2 different
That's
spellings were
spelling in
used.
Jamaica.
Yeah, that's
different spellings were used.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a Jamaican spelling. So I think you see, right, yeah. So that's a Jamaican spelling, but of course the Trini spelling would be Liming. And so it highlights for me, even at that level of when we are saying the same thing, we represent what we say in different ways. How do we get around that? As Caribbean people talking the same, talking the same language, supposedly English.
Yeah, that's
Joyanne, you're muted.
Yes, I'm saying that even the same language translates different into different Creole, the various Creole interpretations. So how are we going to get around that if we do not have a standard language. That's just where I wanted to start.
Before you answer, Camille, the last time we had this, were we able to raise our hand, or was that another Zoom meeting that I had? How do we indicate when we want to speak?
Yeah,
Because
they had a few things here where you could raise your hand.
Yes,
But
so we don't have that this time.
No, we did have it, but I don't know where it gone and the IT man gone.
I've not seen it. But something I wanted to add, I think I understand Joyanne's point, but I think in the interest of standardization, and we have to standardize Lyman and Old Talk, we need to get one spelling. And probably, we could decide on the spelling we're going to use. Either that or we just call it lot. But somehow or the other, we're going to have one spelling of Lyman. In the document, there are two spellings. The agenda that you sent us, there's L-Y-M-I-N-G on top and L-I-M-I-N-G later on. So we really need one spelling.
Margaret, you facilitating this, so you have to watch your show of hands.
With my unmute. Okay, Shakisha. Go ahead, Shakisha. I hear you.
This is not to build on what you shared, Valerie, but I found where you raise your hands. If you go to participants, click on that, and then you will see the hand there to your right on the participants. So you can raise and lower your hand. Are you all seeing it? Great. So it's back in. All right, awesome. I'll lower my hand now.
All right, so Valerie made the comment that there is L-Y-M-I-N-G and L-I-M-I-N-G, and she talked about the standardization of the word. I know L-Y-M-I-N-G is a Jamaican way of spelling it and all of that. What are some of your opinions? Do you think we should have one spelling, or we leave it as regards particular to the country itself?
I can't figure out the raising the hand thing, kind of that smart. So I'll just put the original hand up. That all right? Margaret? Margaret?
Yes, you can see a hand.
All right. So I think, I don't know, I figure we should use whatever language appropriate to the country we in, because otherwise, like in Cuba, and Anna could speak to this, the Relajo and in Haiti, the different words, they could use that. I remember when Anna was first doing it, she had put, we call this thing lot, right? And I said, no, let's not minimize Lyman and Old Talk to lot. Let that come from people. And the first time when we was at the conference in 2019, someone abridged it to lot. Not from me, Shakisha, Anna, and Margaret, but from somebody else. So I think that abbreviation of it to lot have to come from people themselves, not from us, because I don't think we should remove the word Lyman without people knowing the background, the history, the context, everything that go with it. You know, people have to hear the word Lyman and Old Talk first so that we know what it is, that we don't minimize it, we don't negate it, we don't obliterate it, right? So, but then again, in Jamaica, they have L-Y-M, and in somebody else, they might spell it different. And I think that okay, because when we then talk about writing and we talk about, like, when I talk about what people have say, I don't change how they say it. Like when they however they talk, whether it's Creole talk or they train a bit of this and that, I write it exactly as that, because like Margaret had just say about talk, I just write on what Margaret say about language imperialism, that if we don't use our own language and the way we talk and we don't make that acceptable, then we still in a sort of a settler discourse, to me, rather than affirming who we are and how we talk. But that's my opinion.
I have my hand up. How did you do it in your papers, in the publications? And I'm also using the chat. I send 2 chats through to people. So I hope you all have seen the chats.
We
One was to
chat.
ask Veronica to mute.
All
And the
right.
other was to ask if you could send us the publications.
Right.
What did you do in the publication? Did you refer to it as liming in one way? Did you, in the publications, write what you just told us? How did you approach it in the publication?
But we didn't discuss, that's a good question. We didn't discuss whether it's LIMG or LY. I can't remember if we did that. But even in the publication, if like the one we just had published or the one we're writing about for the Journal of Education, for the Peabody Journal of Education, I use the exact same way the people talk. I use that as the excerpts from them. But I use liming because it's not Jamaican. I use LIMING because I'm Trinidadian. If Shakisha writes something about liming and she use LYMING, I okay with that. If Anna use the version of alignment and she use Relahu or whatever it's called here, I kind of okay with that too. But as long as we referencing, the origins of it. Where Margaret going?
Can I?
Yeah.
Margaret.
Margaret
I'll just jump in.
disappear.
I'll just jump in. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we did speak about it in one article where it was acknowledged that there is a variation of spelling and terminologies depending on which Caribbean country we're speaking from. So it is documented that in Trinidad it's LI and for Jamaica it's LY. No, that might be and this is now speaking to what you raised, Valerie. This might be an opportunity for further research because we really haven't looked into it as to the meanings behind the spelling. But I do know for us locally, when we replace the I for the Y, it suggests something, a transformation from formal to informal and the more casual. For example, vibes. Vibes is normally spelled VIBES, but there are times when we switch it to VYBZ, and that is almost it's a deviation. It's intentional, and it suggests a laid back, cool approach to life. And for me, again, for me, not for everyone, that is in sync with what a lime is about in that space of the informal. Yes, perhaps to achieve a particular objective if we're going to look at it as a research approach, but certainly in terms of just the relaxation and the comfort.
Annabelle has her hand up, but you
Yeah.
can't see.
I could see Annabelle. Shakisha, Margaret disappear somewhere, so you have to share this until Margaret come.
Okay, go ahead, Anna.
All right. So I just wanted to share how I did it in my thesis. And what I did is, first of all, to acknowledge that there is a variety of terms for similar practices around the Caribbean, including practices in Cuba where Spanish is spoken as opposed to English. So what I did was, when it was a lime among Cubans, I would call it compartir, which is the term that we have, because it's not really a lime if Cuban people are the ones liming. So I think challenging that idea that we have to standardize the terms for the sake of the standards of academia, I think that is one of the things that we're trying to challenge, because in a way what we're trying to do is to come up with research practices that can be repeated throughout the Caribbean. And the most important part for me is that the practice is very similar. And the underlying assumptions of the way that we do research through that practice is similar. And the terms are going to be diverse, but it's going to be repeated. And that is something that, for example, Benitez Rojo addresses in his article, The Repeating Island, where we have practices that are called differently because our languages are different, but then the underlying practice is very similar and can be used in similar ways. So I think I would align with Shakisha and Camille in encouraging language diversity as part of how we embrace these practices as research methodologies. That would be my contribution in that regard.
Shakisha, and thing have a hand up, Valerie.
Yeah, well, I accept that argument. So we are now all fully aligned. I just wanted to know how you would approach it. I accept the argument that you standardize the practice and not the name. So well defined data. Okay.
All right. Is there
Can
anything else? Go ahead,
can
Camille.
I say though, I don't know if Anna could correct me. I don't know if Anna mean to standardize the practices, but there are similarities in the practices throughout the Caribbean. Like
Well,
yeah, okay. Like we had the food and the drink, the camaraderie, all of
right.
those things. Yeah, all right, okay. I just wanted to be clear.
Not standardize, but define the commonalities of the
Yeah.
practice. Okay, because you have to define the elements of the methodology. That much I will stick to. There must be common elements, and when you define the methodology, just like you have a recipe, you have to put those common elements because we want to be talking the same, not necessarily using the same words, but able to understand each other. Else we'll have chaos. So maybe standardize was the wrong verb, but emphasizing the commonality, I think, is important.
I
Correct,
agree.
Valerie. I
I
agree.
agree.
I agree. And why I think that's really important is that because the practices are connected and because we are increasingly creating a network of research through these practices, we can draw on each other's experience through those commonalities. So that's the thing that I think is really key. That, as Valerie is saying, we find a way of connecting those practices and connecting the research experience that we gain through those practices, even if they are not exactly the same, or even if they're not called the same. But at the end of the day, we're using the same worldview and we're using the same ontology and we're using the same basically practices to do research.
Margaret, can I point out to you? You need to look at the hand going up because Susan and Joyanne hand up there.
All right, so my internet just crashed and I didn't follow the conversation. I'm now on. So who would like to speak? I'm now getting back in. So I missed about a good 5 to 8 minutes.
You can choose
Whose
either
hand is up?
Susan
I'm
or
not seeing
Joyanne.
it.
Susan and Joyanne.
Okay, I can speak now just for a minute while you become reoriented, Margaret. With regard to the lining and the spelling, I think what it is the representation of what we do. And if perhaps in these initial stages where for the benefit of, let's say, readers who are outside of the Caribbean, in a similar fashion as we would put standard 3 is equivalent to grade 4 or something like that, it might be useful to consider whether we might want to use both spelling, the spelling Y and the spelling I, within the same publication, if it would not become too cumbersome, in the reading of it. So that's just one thing. But I agree with the need to be authentic within the context and to use the language of the participants.
Is there anyone else who had their hand up?
Yeah, Joyanne.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So good to know that so much discussion came out to the point that I raised, about just that different spelling. I appreciate Suzanne's point there on the need, especially in the early publications, to indicate that the practices are called different things in different places, so that anybody who is coming into it will understand it. Yep. So I'm happy with that discussion. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, Camille,
Yeah, what Valley's point has made us aware is that we do actually need to do more research within the Caribbean to see how these different practices play out. And I think that really needs to be a serious step going forward.
all right, thank you for the comments. And Shakisha, your hand is up. Sorry. Shakisha, your hand is up.
Yeah, but she can't hear you, Shakisha.
Right. So my point is short. It's just a reminder that as diverse as we are in our stories unfold, the representation of language is mimicking that. And so it's just to be mindful of that, and again to be true to our own practices, noting the similarities, but also allowing the space for the diversity or the distinctions to come through as well in shaping just who we are and what we do.
All right, thanks a lot. All right, so we looked at that important to address that, the fact that we, as Camille pointed out, we really have to do a systemic kind of research across the islands to see how language is used there. In part, when we looked at the colonial language also, there was a question of language, the language that the researcher uses as being a barrier to his or her research. How can we look at that? What are some of the comments that you all have as regards that? How can the barrier of language be addressed, especially given the fact that in some of the islands, as we noted, there are so many nuances, so many variances. Anybody wants to come in on that point?
I'll leave that to the smart people in the group here. Veronica, you talking because you muted. You have to unmute yourself, Veronica.
Joyanne's hand is, and so is mine. Joyanne didn't take down her hand.
Okay.
I think Veronica was speaking, but she just said, here she go.
All right. Here I am again.
All right.
I'm back just now. Hold on. Yes. I think we are multilingual. In some islands, bi-dialectical. Okay, so we always have to translate. And we have the question of standard English, multilingual, and multi-dialectical. And yes, so the question of the master's language is one. But however, the idea of authentic voice is important when you want to report the authentic voice of your speakers, of your participants, and so on, and you want to preserve authenticity if you're talking about a Caribbean research methodology. So wherever, especially when you want to, when we come into things like oral history and you want to report narratives and actual spoken words, it's something, I think it's important to preserve that authenticity of voice by this verbatim reporting, and because that's the key thing about identity, language, and voice, and so on. So we have to celebrate that wherever wherever the opportunity comes.
Okay. All right, Camille, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead. I'll talk after you.
I was saying, I was on Veronica's point there about language, but my thing is, how do we as researchers document and maintain and preserve that? And also, how do we defend it? Because much of what we will do will be critiqued, and as researchers, how do we defend what we do? Because we can't get away from the fact that even though we want to maintain the language and document and preserve especially our indigenous language, a lot of the bargaining power is with the English language of its speakers. So the question is, how do we defend it? How do we, whilst we can document it, whilst we can preserve it, how do we defend it? Camille? No, I know you had a hand up. Just
I didn't have a hand up, but you know what I was going to say though? Or those questions you asked Margaret and everybody, what everybody else say, I think I'm going to use this recording, and if you could put that into a paper, because that will make a really good paper to question that. So with all of us, 8 of us here as co-authors on that. So from wherever you all say now, I'll put it in a paper. So yeah, I can't. I will leave it to others to answer your very complex question, Margaret.
Okay.
No, but let's generate a bit. Valerie, you are not okay. Valerie.
And after me, there was Annabelle.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing Joyanne.
Yeah, Margaret, I see any hand up. I'll tell you, Margaret, Valerie, Annabelle, and Joyanne hand up. You can't see the hand.
So I had wanted to, and Margaret brought us back to it. I felt that I would have liked us to have had a small discussion, although we are touching on it tangentially, about the actual named theme, and that is language as the technology of power. I feel that we didn't really make that argument before we went on to address it indirectly. But again, to come back, we also have, in talking about the challenges that researchers feel because of language, I think I could be wrong, but I think that we are being too much the victim. Every time you submit a paper to a journal, you have to follow the format of that journal. So what are we really asking? Are we saying then that and this is why I'm sorry Saran is not here. Are we saying then that we need to have journals because that's what will take away the barrier. If we have a journal the journal with a formatting that would include this thing. So regardless of what your opinion is, you enter into research and you disseminate information because you want to be understood. You want to have a conversation, you want people to understand what you're saying. And there's nothing wrong with expressing as you want to express, but by first of all, putting it in context. When I lived in New York, I love to use colloquial phrases from Trinidad and Tobago. So for example, my mother had a saying, when you koshi, wet paper could cut you. A lot of people don't know what koshi means, but look at how evocative that statement is. To be cut by wet paper, you have to be extremely unlucky. So that statement defines koshi. So I would often, for non-Caribbean friends, preface it with a little bit of a narrative, and they got the meaning and they loved it. And a lot of people started using koshi. People who had nothing to do with Caribbean ancestry, second generation, just ordinary non-Caribbean Americans. So it's the same way that if we want to be understood, if we want to communicate with other people, we simply need to say, okay, this is who I am, and try to understand me within this context. This is where you and I are alike, and this is what I'm talking about. Because everything you do in research, you have to have operational definitions. And it's the same thing here. So again, two things. Margaret took us back a little bit to the technology of power that language is. I would like to hear a couple more statements about that. And with regard to it being a challenge because of our language, I think the only way we can eliminate that as a challenge is if we get a journal. And if you have had 4 publications, and as Camille said, she is using the very language, then obviously she found no barrier. Anyway, I'm going to come off now, and Annabelle was on next. Remember, she can't use video. So I'll point out when her hand is up, Annabelle.
Nice. So I think what I wanted to do was to build on what you just said and just add that as well as being a technology of power, language can be a very conducive vehicle for connections. Because by writing in English, even if we're using slang and we are honoring indigenous languages, English also connects us with other indigenous people who also write in English. And there can be very valuable connections in how we use the language of the colonizer to write decolonial research alongside other colonial people who are doing the same. I just wanted to put that tension there in terms of how it can be both, and it can be used depending on how it is being used, and the content of the language, not only the language and the shape of the language, but the content of what you're doing can create meaningful and deep connections with other people who are doing similar work elsewhere in the world.
Thanks a lot, Annie. It broke up a lot. I didn't hear a lot of what you said. but I imagine that it would be on the recording. Did anybody else have their hand up? Because I'm not seeing everyone. Joanne, you did?
I do. Yes, I have my hand up. I just want to raise the point about if we're talking about the publication, we're really talking about a written language. So there's this connection, there's this between the oral language and the narratives and the sharing that happens in Lyman. And then what do we do when we write for publication? Interestingly, one of my colleagues just published the first Creole language short story in Belize. And in her book, she gives the version in English and she gives the version in Creole. And interestingly, when she gave the Creole to Creole speakers to read, they could not read it. So there's this wanting to put the authentic word on the page, but sometimes the readers of the language don't have the literacy to read, so they can speak it, but they can't read it. So I hear Valerie saying, you know, about getting journals and whatever. So we have to make sure that we have some opportunities for translations to ensure that even the speakers of the language can read the language that we intend to write in.
All right, thanks a lot, Joanne. I want to comment on that because for me, that brings us right back to the question of the kind of psychological belief that English language is the tool to use. And some writers have referred to this as a sort of, they call it a conscientization of language, meaning that if we, just as you said, the authentic language is on the page and people don't know it. People don't know that language. And many people, I think, do not want to know their language because they have so been psychologically influenced that to get. Now, just let me finish here. Let me finish. Because I was reading something where even their own language they no longer want to speak because to get ahead, they have to use.
So that's not the point. That's not the point I'm making. I'm making the point that we have to ensure that if we have other languages, that people become literate in their language and the language that they speak. I'm in no way denigrating any other language or saying that, you know, English or whatever. I'm saying that we also have to put in place opportunities for people to be able to read in the language that they speak, the oral language. I mean, and being in Belize, it really brings it home to me. We have native Spanish speakers, native Quechua speakers, Maya and Garifuna, but they cannot read the language. So they're neither, they're oral, they have oral abilities, but they can't read the language that they speak. And so I'm saying that if we, I mean, again, for discussion, if we are talking about that power relationship, then we have to give them the power to be able to read the language, as I'm sure Camille has seen with Terero Mari, that one of the things that had to happen was that people had to learn how to read Mari. And so 20 years later, you have the, you know, the language around that people can now read. I mean, that's the point I'm making. In no way am I saying that English should be you know, have higher power. That we really need to ensure that if we are giving people literacy in their languages, that it's not just the speaking of the language, but also the writing of the language.
Just on that, I know I'm coming to you, Camille.
No, Susan too, Shakisha and Valerie up. Me too.
I got your point, Joy, and I totally got your point, but I'm saying my point was really, how do we get people to know that that is what they need when they have been psychologically influenced in a different way? All right, who is coming in now? Sorry.
There's Susan, Shakisha, Valerie, and me. Margaret, you mute your phone again. Oh, my Lord.
Suzanne, could you come in, please? Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. I was thinking as well that as researchers in this area, in this field of decolonizing research, if you will, we need to be multilingual, as we've been saying, as I think it was Veronica. So therefore, we need to be able to access all variety of forms of language. And not only that, ways of representing the research that perhaps go beyond just the written form, but in the interim, while we are working on perhaps having persons become literate in their language, using other forms of representation. So documentaries, videos, oral history, whatever it might be, to help to show them what's the outcome of the research, what we have found in their language. I don't know if that is feasible. I don't know how well we can do it, but maybe it's something we can consider.
Thanks a lot, Suzanne. Camille, did you want to come in there? And then Valerie, and then Veronica.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the students that I have now come from all. I have a Indian person, a Cuban, Filipino, Colombian. Before was Nigerian, one was Zimbabwe, and they, for the Mari and for the Pacific, the Samoan student, he would put in use Samoan words in his stuff, in quite a lot of it. I know some enough Samoan words to understand what he's saying, but he didn't change anything. That is because the person he talked to spoke in English and put in some Samoan words, because only a Samoan, there was no English translation for it. It just wasn't an English translation for it. And I had to, that it was incumbent upon me as a reader, as a supervisor, to go and find out what it was. Maybe I probably couldn't get a grasp of it, but he not writing this only for me. He writing it for a broader audience of Samoan and Pacific people. So I think we do have to, that I understand Joanne's concern though, because the thing is though, who's going to accept it? I mean, writing for it, our work to be accepted. But I think that acceptance had to come from us first, because if we back ourselves and what we do, like Joanne mentioned, Tireo Mari, you can actually write all your theses and everything and have your paper written in Tireo Mari. And they just have to find somebody. And it was a big hiss on the roar and resistance coming out of everybody's ear. But now it's a done thing. That's what you do. So I figure if we put it in our language, and what Margaret said, we have to be literate in that language. We just don't like to show that we literate in our own dialects and our own language, because to show that we understand better how we talk, show that we not intellectual. But we know our own language. We know what we're saying.
All right, thanks, Camille. Valerie, you wanted to come in?
Shakisha was before me, so I'll come in after Shakisha.
Shakisha, where are you, Missy? Please come in.
The point I want to make is I struggle with the term literacy, right, how you presented it, Joanne. But it also brought to the fore the fact that in trying to legitimize, um, for me, it's patois, or version of Creole. We have so many variations, and that is what has contributed to the confusion. At one end, we have persons who have relied on the English language to create a visualization of Creole, and at the other extreme, we have the resistance to the English language, and I'm not sure what the reference point is. And so at either end, you find that there isn't a, a general consensus of what this should be in written form. And so we are a lot more comfortable speaking and engaging each other with it. But when you look at the written and the fact that there's so many variations, and I'm talking about from within academia, because I've seen publications within academia right there at UA, and I've looked at it and I've wondered what is this? What is it trying to achieve? And it felt like it was missing the point altogether. So I am hearing what Valerie said before, funny enough, in terms of standardization, but I'm not using that word. I don't know if that was you, Valerie, but it's the journey towards a consensus of what the written form should be. I don't know if any of our countries are further ahead in that, but I know that Jamaica is far from there.
All right, Shakisha, thanks. Valerie, comments?
Okay, yes, I have several comments as a matter of fact. First of all, Margaret, your point about um, people not wanting to become literate because they feel they can get ahead in English. I attended a focus group on patois in Paramin. So for those of you who are not Trinidadian, Paramin is a kind of hilly region in one part of Trinidad, and they cling to their French patois traditions so strongly. They have a patois mass. They have everything patois. And I attended a focus group with one of our UTT students who is looking at the role of patois in the culture of Trinidad and Tobago. And they trace patois and its origins and how it traveled geographically through Trinidad from Lopino here, there, everywhere. And they're fiercely proud. And when they had the patois mass, people came from all over the Caribbean. So there's no doubt about pride. But one of the themes that was examined in that focus group was about how comfortable they are reading patois. And what was discovered indeed was that the literacy was low. So I don't know, you have people who are fiercely proud who think in patois and have to change it into English. And they don't bother with it if they don't want to. And yet the literacy is not there. I also wanted to make a comment in response to what Joyanne said, that as researchers, we have to ensure that people become literate. That is not the role of a researcher. That is the role of a government. You know, we can't ensure anything. All we could do as researchers is to put our research, summarize our research, discuss our research in terms where people could understand it so we could have an exchange, an intellectual exchange. So it's not about what forcing the reader to achieve literacy in what we are saying. It's about making sure that the reader is able to make the connection. Every time Camille writes me and she says, Kia ora, and she ends in something, I find myself yearning to understand. And sometimes I forget and I answer in English. And I write her back and I say, could you tell me what I was supposed to say? Instead of just goodbye, because when she writes, it's as if my English words lack beauty. And when I'm in a hurry and I answer, I said, oh my God, I should have answered. She was teaching me some phrases, I should have answered with the right phrase and things like that. So it's all about making the connections. You do a publication, you make the connections at the beginning, you explain that this is it, and the whole idea that Joyanne said about her friend putting the English translation in a book. Well, of course, a book is not a journal, but I think there may be room, even if you give the right, you give the exact comments that the people gave, maybe you can then describe the themes in English or something, but we need to get a way of communicating, because the real power, you spoke about the technology of power, that technology of power is finding the ways to communicate. And that's the real power, communicating. Because if you can't communicate, you have no power. Just think of somebody blind, deaf, and dumb. They're powerless because they have no way of communicating. They can't communicate with the eyes, they can't communicate, you know, with the tongue. So the inability to communication is the real power of language. And to have communication, you must be on the same page. You don't have to say it in the same way. That's why we established at the beginning that there are the same practices and we make the connections. All right, so I am going to shut up now. I see Joyanne's hand is back up. I don't know if it was up, but she didn't take it down.
Okay, Camille had a hand up. Thanks a lot, Valerie, for that.
I was just saying that I've been putting comments in the, I put comments in the chat, yeah.
All right, I was going to actually say that we want to remember Joyanne's comment when she says, who is our audience? And I think that is something that would generate a lot of discussion, especially with that. But before Camille makes a comment, I just want us to have just about 2 other comments, because I'd really like us, if we can, to explore the second theme that we have. So Camille is coming in now.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the whole idea that we have to define what literacy is also power, because we still using a Eurocentric way to determine literacy. I know that's going to open up a whole kind of worms, and people say, well, we have to understand each other. So, but we still then defaulting back to a Eurocentric way of determining what literacy is. And I was going to say something as well, I forget.
All right, are there any other comments? Just one or two more comments before we round up the discussion on language, on decolonial language, and on all kinds of the complexities when we consider the power, the bargaining power of the dominant language, etc. Any other comments before we go to the second theme? Anybody? Yes, Joanne, you have your hand up, or you're just catching it for it?
Okay, just to say, my hand is up. Sorry.
Who is that? Susan, hand up, Margaret. You can't see it.
Hand is up. Yeah.
Yes, Suzanne,
Yes.
let's hear your comment.
Okay, well, just to say, I think the discussion thus far, therefore, has led us directly into the second theme, where we're saying that language seen as linguistic imperialism, because it seems that is what we have been trying to subvert throughout all the discussion of language as a technology of power. So maybe we just need to, I don't know, acknowledge it, as Camille said. I suppose in terms of trying to understand one another, we have to somehow choose a way of communicating. And that way of communicating might come from the more dominant partner, but it's always, I find, that the so-called oppressed, if you will, seems to always find a voice or way to try to subvert and overturn that, and which is what we're seeing with the example with the Belizean Creole, with the Patois in Trinidad and so on. And it's as we learn more, and as we ourselves, as Camille said, we are knowledgeable, and as we perhaps remove those psychological barriers to our normal everyday way of being, and we become more confident and proud, as someone said, perhaps then we will form a capacity that will allow us to recognize the language, our own language, not the dominant power now, but language as technology of power. You know what they say, though? They say that the oppressed becomes the oppressor. So we have to also be careful, I guess, about that. So we have to consider. Thank you. That's it.
Quite good comments there, Suzanne, and I'm glad that we're recording this, because lots of ideas came up. Who is our audience, the technology of power, language, linguistic imperialism, and so. All right, we want to go on, if you all don't mind, to our second theme, which brings in some of these aspects, because we were looking at Caribbean epistemology and ontology in research. We're looking here at a production of knowledge, especially looking at audience, looking at our research, a production of knowledge that really seeks to reassert cultural identities. But as we know, epistemology looks at knowing, and ontology looks at values and being and all that. How do we get around this? How do we kind of put this out? And it brings us back into all that you're saying, that whole thing about L-I-M-I-N-G as opposed to L-Y-M-I-N-G, you know, all of these nuances. So let's discuss that a little bit. I'm not too sure, Joanne, if you, because, you know, so who would like to jump into the river here?
Did we lose Camille? Oh no, she came back on. Okay, good.
Right.
I wanted to show you all what Margaret was referring to in case you didn't have the agenda up.
All right, so just to continue and to bring us back into the conversation, as I was saying, what we are doing here in decolonizing all of what we're doing, our research, is we are seeking to reassert cultural identities. We're seeking to bring back to the fore and to sort of not exclude, but reassert what we have in the Caribbean. As you know, and one of the things when I was looking at epistemology and ontology, you know, in a lot of Eurocentric research, we have different theoretical frameworks that are unique, you know, that stand on its own. And I feel when we looked at Liming and Old Talk, lots of frameworks came into being: participatory research, action research, focus group discussions. And I'm thinking that our kind and indigenous research really has to have a sort of eclectic kind of approach if we have to examine all of the nuances that we're talking about, if we have to bring it back to the people, if we have to stand, if we have to defend it. So let's talk a little bit about knowing. What do we know? How do we know? And being. And I open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, my hand is up. So I suspect that I am in a group of one with the views that I'm about to express. I don't agree that a Caribbean researcher is different from a researcher elsewhere. To me, they are common denominators of research, that as long as you say you're doing research, they have to be practiced. And I find it difficult to think that because you come from the Caribbean, you're facing challenges or you're facing, to me, doing this is for beauty, is for enjoyment. It's not necessarily because we have to do it. It's because we can do it, and in introducing Caribbean methodologies, we're introducing a new format of methodology. The other thing that, again, that I often run afoul of people in social science with is, to somebody like me, what the average social scientist will call a theoretical framework, I call a view. There's a difference to me between a theoretical framework and an opinion or a hypothesis that somebody could link up. And then they do research and they try to link what they discovered to the framework, the theory that they espoused. I often take a different view. I like inductive research. I like to get data or information and let that speak to me. I like consensus because, again, to me, that's where the real power lies. And because of that, I tend to have a skewed viewpoint from social scientists. I think, though, that I'm not skewed in this regard, and that we have to differentiate between practical frameworks and theoretical frameworks. A focus group is a practical framework. Semi-structured interviews, journaling, the narrative format, those are practical frameworks. And there is no difference. We are now introducing, to me, another practical framework in Lyman and Old Talk. And I believe that Lyman and Old Talk has applications outside of Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, the Caribbean region. I see no reason why people in North America cannot use Lyman and Old Talk, because they have social gatherings in North America. They may not be exactly like our lives, but they have social gatherings where they eat and they drink and they talk. And those, just like we use focus groups and we use semi-structured interviews and we can use journaling, there's no reason why they cannot use Lyman and Old Talk. I would like to see it put forward as an additional methodology. To me, I don't see why it has to be put forward as a methodology for us in the Caribbean to use. I think it's a methodology that we in the Caribbean are proposing, and we offer it to people. We say, yes, look, we are introducing this new way of getting information that might actually give you richer information for some themes than a very rigid format of a focus group would. So here we are suggesting to you, because it fits in with our culture, but we are telling you that you can have it in your culture as well. It's a methodology that you can use, just like we use the focus groups down here. So this whole idea of eating and drinking while you talk is very important, because again, I went to a focus group on limbo last week, Thursday. It was like, I have facilitated and been present at probably hundreds of focus groups in different countries. That focus group on limbo with a set of limbo dancers was like nothing I had ever experienced. It was wild and rollicking. It was more like Lyman and Old Talk, to be truthful. So just to sum up what I'm saying that I think we diminish Lyman and Old Talk by suggesting that this is the only way Caribbean people. I think it's something wonderful. I told Camille and Shakisha that from day one. From the time I heard it at Valsain and Margaret, although I didn't talk to Margaret as much about it, but from the time I heard it at Valsain, it resonated with me. I enjoyed hearing it. I think I would enjoy doing it. I started to see places where it could be used. I enjoy it. And this is what I don't want us to lose, the enjoyment of research. It's not a penance. It's an enjoyment. And we are putting forward something here that is a fun way of collecting information and data. And I don't see why everybody in the world can use it. All right, let me stop.
Thanks a lot, Valerie. You raised a lot of pertinent points there that I'd like us to come back to, but I see Camille's hand up. Yes, Camille.
Yeah. First of all, Valerie, nobody at all saying, first of all, that with Lyman and Old Talk is only for use in the Caribbean. I think we made this point before that Lyman and Old Talk is a Trinidadian thing. In other parts of the world, in Cuba it takes place differently, in Italy it takes place differently. Everywhere have their own thing, and I think that should be embraced. What we're trying to do is not to confine this at all to the Caribbean, but to tell people, especially our indigenous peoples, use your own ways of interacting and communicating to share knowledge and to gather knowledge. That's what we're saying. Lyman and Old Talk could be used by everybody, but it's not going to be called Lyman and Old Talk in Italy. It's not going to be called Lyman and Old Talk in the southern states of the US. But for me, the greater point is for people of color, indigenous peoples, all types of people to just use their own natural ways of engaging and interacting to share knowledge. So yeah, that's one thing. The second thing is a Caribbean researcher, is it different from an African researcher, different from a whatever researcher? I will have to say the differences lie in our worldviews. You can't deny that our worldviews, our lived experiences don't frame the way we see things. So there is that difference. The only way that you could, because if we were to say no, that means we're saying that we have been so colonized by a similar Eurocentric or singular education system that we can't think beyond that. So I say, let our worldviews, let our lived realities inform the way we see research and how research is carried out. It's not better, it's no worse, but it might be, our ways of doing might be better for us. Other ways might not be worse, as it has been shown in the Pacific, has been shown with indigenous groups that the imposition of European, Eurocentric ways have not benefited those people. So I say, yes, we're not saying we're different, or to say that we're different doesn't mean to make us excluding, it doesn't say we're excluding others. It's not saying that. We are just, it's more than just pointing out our differences, Valerie. It's more affirming who we are and our own ways of doing research. This is not to say, well, we don't want to stand with you, or we're different, or I don't think it's about that. It's more of us affirming our own ways of doing it. But I want to bring back to something, two questions. I want to ask who here is using Lyman and Ulto, because Valerie, you just say that you went and did something with Limbo and was so good and was vibrant, was almost like Lyman and Ulto. Well, then why didn't you use Lyman and Ulto? Because the thing is, though, it can't just be us. If we still not backing ourselves in our own ways of engaging. You did something and you just
I didn't facilitate the focus group.
All right, okay. Because I'm
saying student and I was just there to support him.
Right. So I'm saying, but the thing is, so if you saw something happen there that looked like Lyman and Old Talk, then it's Lyman and Old Talk. Don't bring it back to the. I don't, tell you, student, hey, what you doing there is Lyman and Old Talk. It's Lyman. That's a lime, and we use that way because that's the only way we can affirm. I mean, we could talk about decolonizing methodologies, and I think that thing in the paper that we're doing for the Vanderbilt University, my point about that is I don't want to enter into decolonizing methodologies. I think there's a place for it, but at this point in time, we need to affirm methodologies, because once you continue talking about decolonizing methodologies, and I do appreciate people who advance that conversation, once you keep talking about decolonizing methodologies, we still mired within a settler discourse. We're still linking to a settler discourse, a colonial discourse. So when we talk about affirming, then we standing in and of itself. What we doing? That's my talk.
Thanks a lot. Lots of ideas there, and I want to jump in, but let me give some other people a chance. I'm just seeing black on some of the persons. Anybody has their hand up that would like a chance?
I have my hand up because I just wanted to quickly, and I won't take too long, comment on Camille. First of all, I didn't facilitate the research. It was a doctoral student. The second thing is, I am telling everybody I can, including this doctoral student, about Lyman and Old Talk. I spoke about Lyman and Old Talk to a student in agricultural science this afternoon, just before I came on. I was telling him what I was going to do, and I broke it down. I've tried to engage as many people as I can in the conversation of Lyman and Old Talk. So all the cultural studies people, the student who was doing the focus group on Limbo, told her about Lyman and Old Talk. The difference from the Lyman and Old Talk methodology is that we had agreed that it would be like a social engagement where you eat and you drink and you're there to relax. It wasn't relaxing. They were there for the purpose. But let's not talk about that right now. The comment I wanted to make is that my worldview never influences the research I do. I look on myself as a conduit. That's why I said I like consensus opinion. I like to have people say things and then I carry their views back to the public. So as a researcher, how I think, how I feel, and especially if I'm facilitating a focus group, this guy is himself a limbo dancer. And I had to restrain him from participating in the discussion because it was a focus group. It wasn't Lyman and Old Talk. In Lyman and Old Talk, when we identify the elements of the methodology, the designers, you, Shakisha, Margaret, you all have to tell us what are the points. Is the researcher able to enter into the discussion? We agreed that we would talk about alcohol because it's part of a lot of lines. We agree that music can sometimes obscure what is being said, although Trinidadians use music. North Americans don't necessarily have a lot of music at their lines. And we have to also agree as to whether the researcher can participate. Is this a sort of participant observation type of research? In a focus group, it's not. The facilitator stays out of it and collects the opinions of the participants. But I also wanted, there was another point I wanted to make about, so there is that, the way I like to do it is I like the information to speak to me, and I convey the voice of the information to people. So I really don't think my worldview, now it's hard to tell. Margaret is the psychologist. She will probably tell me that I'm delusional, because they probably know the human brain more. I don't think I'm doing it, but maybe I am. But I like to express what the people are saying. And that's why I tend to structure my collection methods so that I keep myself out of it as much as possible. So that is one of the reasons maybe why I don't think that the Caribbean methods are different. Now, I know that in the early beginnings, we spoke about sending lot outside, but in tonight's discussion, I don't think we convey that tonight. Tonight, when we spoke about the challenges that we have and things like that, I think tonight the discussion forgot that we had said we wanted to push it out to people. We want to say, here, look at this. And it spoke about, in a sense, almost being like a comfort to us. Now, the other thing I wanted to tell you, Camille, I don't think we have to teach Indigenous people that they must exchange information in their own languages. They do that already. We're not teaching Indigenous people how to do research. We are collecting information from people. It doesn't have to be Indigenous people. I don't see why we can't go and collect information from a group of non-Indigenous people who are alive. I know that in New Zealand, it's a lot about Indigenous people, but not necessarily elsewhere. So everybody communicates how they have to communicate, and in a line they will. So we don't have to teach people how to communicate. We just have to adopt any kind of communication information methods to get information. Now, if we apply in Lyman and Old Talk, I am assuming that it's still purposive, that we still want the participants in the Lyme to give us views on the topic that is our topic of research, not necessarily theirs. So we want to use it, yes, but for our research. I didn't think that we wanted to use Lyman and Old Talk just to see how these people talk to each other. They're not flies. I thought you wanted to use it. You have a view. It could be a view about anything, and you want to find out how people think. Some people will express themselves better in a relaxed form of Lyman and Old Talk. And that's why I think it's so important. That's why I think it's so useful. That's why I think that farmers in the river would want to have a Lyman Old Talk to tell us about their issues with fertilizers and growing rice in the river. That is not about us. It's about them and getting the information for our research topic from them. But in a sense, it's still purposive. Those are the people who could give us the information we want, but the research topic is ours. All right, so I'm going to go now.
Thanks a lot, Valerie. I want to jump in there just a little bit. Valerie, I think we're on the same page, because you spoke a lot of...
That's what we stopped here until 11:45.
Hello, y'all can hear me?
I can hear you, Max.
Yes, I can hear you, Margaret.
Okay, all right, because I heard that kind of gargling. But yeah, Valerie, I was saying, I think we're on the same page as regards where the participants are and what they want and what they can give the researcher. And so when I look at the whole thing about...
something was happening with Annabelle, and her hand is now up. Now, remember, she was on a bus. So
no, she's okay. She's okay, Barry. Annabelle is okay. Yeah, okay. I'm texting her. No worries.
I would like to comment on something that Valerie said, just briefly. I think my internet is good for now.
Margaret, can you let Annabelle talk?
Go ahead, Annabelle. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to comment on what Valerie was saying about participants and how do we negotiate the acknowledging that intersubjective relationships that we establish as researchers with our participants and the fact that we are doing topic-based research. So how do we make sure that we get what we are hoping to get from a session and that participants also get what they want to get? So I can only speak from my experience doing research about cultural identity. of Caribbean migrants living in New Zealand. So what I did was to bring the topic to the line and suggest that we talk about the cultural identity, but what cultural identity meant for different groups was very different. And I didn't have any influence whatsoever on what people decided to discuss once we were talking about cultural identity. So groups where, for example, people were parents, a lot of the discussion went towards child rearing practices, for example. In other discussions, people talked about experiences of racism. In other lines, people talked about music and dancing and how social life is very different in New Zealand. So, what I am trying to say is that if we expect to get a very specific sort of question answered as researchers, we may miss out on what actually participants, what the meaning of that research has for participants, because we cannot foresee. Um, I could not have foreseen these topics that emerged in the limes because they were not relevant for me, but they were relevant for Caribbean participants, which at the end of the day is the topic of my research. So what I would like to invite everyone to think about is how much of that fear that we're going to lose control and that we're going to end up with useless information is actually linked with how we have been socialized to understand research and how we have been educated to understand research as something where the researcher holds a lot of power. And I can tell you, and Camille can testify to that, there was a lot of anxiety at the beginning of my research in terms of, are we going to get something out of this, or is this going to be just endless chatting about nothing? And at the end of the day, now that I'm just writing the final sessions of my thesis, I can tell that the discussion was extremely rich and that a lot of very relevant information to my research question got out of that. It's just a matter of challenging yourself and changing your position towards the research.
That's it, Annabelle?
Yes, that's it. Did it go through? Because I can never tell. I don't know if the internet is good.
Yeah, we heard a lot of what you said, and so I know Valerie made a comment bringing the research back to the audience. Something like that, Valerie, you said? Valerie?
I was agreeing. Annabelle said you bring the topic to the lime, and that
Yes.
is what you have to do. You have to bring the topic to the lime. Now, I just wanted to make a quick comment. When, even in a focus group, when the participants introduce additional themes, you incorporate it. That's, again, how you get rich information. Never, never be afraid of extra things coming in that you didn't see.
But
That is
however,
what
Valerie,
does.
we have to acknowledge, I believe that we have to acknowledge that when you start off a research in your position as a researcher, you come off with an advantage of what people themselves understand research to be. So if you suggest themes at the beginning, you are directioning the research in the space that you want to put it at, which is not necessarily the most relevant for participants. So what I'm trying to say, and of course this is again just my view and my experience, I guess that everyone will have their own priorities and their own ways of conducting research. But with what my experience with conducting 8 lines to study something which admittedly is quite wide. So maybe if it was a more narrow topic, so to speak, it would have been a little bit different. But in my experience, when you bring the topic to the line and let it flow, what you get is two things. You get a wider variety of topic that you as a research probably could not have been able to see or to ask right from the get-go. And second, you get an additional layer of information that I found very useful, which is that, for example, when a topic has been discussed for 40 minutes in the line, you can confidently say that that topic is very relevant from the group, and that's very valuable data when you're doing social research. So for example, when a group has discussed child rearing for 3 hours, you can say that for that group, for some reason, that's very, very important. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, and that puts Lyman and Old Talk in a special kind of category because they're there to enjoy themselves. So you have a responsibility to them that in a focus group you don't. In a focus group, they are there to hear you, to speak to your topic. So a focus group does not have the responsibility of the participants saying what they want to say. But Lyman and Old Talk, you made a very, very good point that I didn't think about. So in a sense, you have illustrated exactly what happened to you. I just think it adds interest. I'm never afraid of that. I'm never afraid of if I started off as a researcher wanting A, B, and C, and somebody gives me D and E, I say, thank you very much, I take it, I'm happy, and it adds to the richness. So I think we're on the same page there. And I think, though, that you introduce something, you can't bring people on a line and then bore them with your topic. So that is something else for Camille and Shakisha and Margaret and maybe you, Annabelle, to think about in terms of formulating the general methodology for the rest of us.
I think it's incumbent on all of us.
Well, yes, if you invite people on a line, and I never thought about this until Annabelle just said it. If you invite people on a line, it's like inviting them to a party. You can't afford to force them into only what you want to say. Maybe you need to have multiple lines and just let them roam free. There has got to be a time, and I guess people have to use their instincts. And I just wanted to make one quick thing. The limbo session, I suggested to the student that he make it into a film, because I think it'll make a great film. So that's what somebody in this session suggested earlier for the Lyman and Old Talk sessions. When you get a session that is that rich, we need to think film, short or long.
Thanks a lot, Valerie. I just want to throw something into the mix because lots of things are coming back, and I think we on the theme of the Caribbean epistemology and oncology, and I think you all have zoned it a lot into the corner of the participants. I want to throw something into the mix of the Caribbean researcher, and this is just a question I'm throwing out there. You spoke, a lot of you spoke about bringing the topic to the line, and the themes can't be the researcher and all of that. Do you think, and this is a question here, do you think the values of the Caribbean researcher or the aims of indigenous research are the same aims as would be of somebody, let's say, from the Eurocentric thing? And Valerie spoke about difference, and I don't want to bring that word difference into it, but do you think that the aims of the Caribbean researcher, the values, the quest for that sort of cultural identity is the same as would be a European researcher? Because when you look at all of what you have just discussed, Caribbean research, I believe, is characterized by transformation, by participation, and as opposed, let's say, to what I think a lot of these focus groups or these other things as being static. So I'm throwing that into the mix. Let's go back into the corner of the researcher here, not so much the participants, but what do you think has to happen or has been happening that possibly we are not aware of? Yes, Camille, I see your hand up.
Annabelle has her hand up.
All right, Camille, you, and then Annabelle. Let's go. Camille, you have to unmute. I think, Camille, unmute.
Sorry. I think the aims of a researcher might be the same. I think depending on the researcher, the outcomes will be different. Because my aim could be to investigate, say, literacy among Caribbean islanders. As a Caribbean islander and knowing our indigenous migrant history, of the outcomes I get might be one that will affirm. And if I was from another thing, I will say, oh, well, they don't have books, oral tradition is nothing, therefore the outcome will be that they're illiterate people, and therefore thus I present them in a different way. So I think it makes a difference, and I still go back to this, it makes a difference, and it makes a difference who it is carrying out the research. And I think if you in that will view it's even though the aims might be the same, the outcomes will be different, and the impact on the people who share their knowledge with you will be different.
All right, thanks for that. Annabelle, you had your hand up, or Shakisha, who had their hand up?
Joyanne has a hand up from what I could see here.
All right.
Yeah, I have my hand up because I'm just thinking about my own experience of being engaging in the research outside as a career person in New Zealand doing research, but still being very interested in finding out, getting to the root of a Caribbean issue, how teachers learn to teach without pre-service teacher education. So I think that you can't leave your Caribbeanness behind. At least I didn't, in terms of when I engaged. So the time we're talking 1999, so 20 years ago, leaving a Caribbean where things like doing research based on people's stories certainly was not considered to be research 20 years ago, and coming into a space where all the things that we're talking about, decolonizing methodologies, had just come out. Linda Tways, but had just brought out her book, and certainly working with Sue Middleton on narratives, helping me to recognize the importance of what we had to say as Caribbean people. And in fact, my thesis has as all of the chapters are titled by Trinidadian sayings. The thesis is called Talk Your Talk. And every single chapter is about, because I recognize as a Caribbean person outside of the Caribbean how important it was to have the language. Of course, I use the Kotise Kotila dictionary definition because I realized I was outside of my element. But those sayings are really important to help me frame each chapter as I went along. So I don't think that as Caribbean researchers, even if we're working outside of the Caribbean, that we can leave our Caribbeanness behind, because it really shapes who we are. And we have to be honest and acknowledge that. And I know I felt really a sense of peace knowing that I can use old talk. In fact, that's how my thesis starts, the various kinds of talk throughout the Caribbean, because talk is important. And to know that I could use talk as a way of not only gathering the data, but even expressing the thesis was really very important. So that's it based on my experience. But I think that if I were doing the research in the Caribbean, that it would not have turned out the way that it turned out. And I probably may have had a far more Eurocentric leaning to investigate in the issue. So sometimes being out of your element, I'm sure Camille, well, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but sometimes being out of your element brings in that Caribbeanness. It really zones in on who you are. And
yeah, you can speak for me. That's right. I agree.
Yeah. Who you are and why. And similarly, being in Belize, you'd think that, oh, yes, it's still part Caribbean, but being here really shows me what is to be Trinidadian, for example. So it's quite complex, but I don't think that we leave it behind.
Thanks a lot, Joyanne. And it brings me back to something I started off by talking about earlier, how we defend what we know, and to what extent do we defend it. I want Vero. Vero, you're still there to come in just a little bit. I didn't hear your beautiful voice for a long time. Any comments, Veronica? Vero, you there?
You need to unmute, Veronica.
Yeah. Okay, some thoughts going through my mind. In terms of the researcher-participant relationship, I'm thinking even now those terms are becoming unpopular. There is this the power-authority relationship between the researcher and the researched. And what is bothering me a bit is that the line is a peer group, it's an exchange among peers. And I'm wondering, how does a researcher who, let's say you want to research your students, so the students have their peers, and you're researching what we call researching down, and you want to get this information. I'm seeing, well, actually I thought of a solution, whether you can actually arrange for they to have their line, collect the information without you being present. I was thinking of that solution, because to me it comes like parent eavesdropping on the, it's a peer group thing. And so that power authority relationship to me is a bit of an obstacle that we wanted to deal with. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Sure.
Thanks a lot, Vero. I just want to make a comment that and go back to a line that we held in New York when there were not, it was the peer line, it was different generations. And I think the opportunity that the younger ones had to hear what the older ones said was phenomenal. So it depends on, I imagine what you're researching, but I don't believe that it is a peer group relationship by any means. Yes, Camille?
Because I see what Veronica's saying, but Veronica, do you think because we so tightly wound into that the researcher has this power and the participants did, and this imbalance of power that we don't think? Because if you look at reading Anna's draft chapters of a thesis, which she's going to submit to me in November, no pressure there, Anna, but she's inserted herself as one of the limers, sharing the knowledge too, because they didn't see her as separate from them. She brought a topic. True, she did bring a topic to the lime, but they asked her questions too, and they contributed, and they rebelled, they rebuked her what she was saying, they responded to what she was saying, they dismissed what she was saying, they agreed with what she was saying. It was all part of what a lime is. There was no that there was true, they were all sharing knowledge. But I think we are so set that the researcher goes in there to talk and to collect information. That whole collection of information, that's where the power imbalance is. But the sharing of knowledge, I think that brings on a different connotation.
I agree with Camille, and thank you, my dear supervisor, for reminding me that I have a deadline coming up. Probably shouldn't be traveling. But yeah, so to build on what Camille just said, and just taking advantage that I'm off the bus for like 5 minutes or so, there's two sides of that. So one side of not having that feeling that you're eavesdropping, and I can understand how that can be the case when it's not a peer lime. So when, for example, there's another layer of complexity in terms of being a professor and then doing liming with students and something like that. That was not my case. So I identified as a Caribbean migrant, same as my other participants. So what I did was, first of all, I opened myself. I was completely open to receiving and making questions. So I did share my point of view with participants, and I had an opinion on things. And when I didn't agree with something that was being said, I gave my background to why I was in disagreement, etc., etc. And of course, that has been questioned a number of times, because it has been questioned from the assumption that by sharing my opinion, I was influencing the opinion of my participants. However, the counter challenge for that question is that the assumption that the researcher will influence the participants by participating comes from an underlying assumption that the researcher is in a position of power, hence being able to influence your participants. But if you put yourself in a peer position authentically, and you are as open to be teased, to be mocked, to be rebuked, like Camille said, your opinion is not necessarily going to have any more weight than the opinion of any other participant. That being said, where I still see, and I don't think that there is a theme for today, but maybe it can be put in the next agenda. The thing is that at the end of the day, it is the researcher who is recording the line. And as far as I have done my work, and this is something that can be changed in the future, and I hope it is changed in the future, the analysis and the writing is still the domain of the researcher. And that is an imbalance of power that needs to be recognized, because I am the one looking across the line. I am the one who took part in all the lines, and I am the one who is making choices in terms of whose words are going to be in the final report. So that's the end of my contribution, and that is definitely a huge discussion about how do we not only collect data, but how do we process and write that data, and what's the power imbalance in that. So that's my 20 cents.
Thanks a lot, Anna. I have to wrap up this end of the conversation. I will allow just for one more comment. I would really like Joyanne to come in and tell us a little bit about the conference coming up in April 2020, and Shakisha to mention a little bit about the CRM conference in Jamaica. So one other comment, anybody would like just to wrap up on our theme of epistemology? Many points have been raised, which we will unpack and send forward to you after this forum. Does anybody want to make a final comment or so? Susan, are you still on board? All right. Okay.
Yes, I'm
so,
still on board, but I know I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm
all
fine.
right.
I don't
Thank
yeah.
you. All right. So we will just wrap up the conversation on epistemology and ontology in research, and really the values of the researcher, as Anna said, and the power imbalances are something to look at, because at the end of the day, we have to document the research and we have to take it forward. We come to the next part of the forum, where I'd like Joanne, if you can, just to step in and tell us a little bit about the conference coming up. Shakisha, are you still there? Okay, Joanne, yes.
Yes, okay, great. Good. First of all, let me say to Anna, it was so good to see those bus seats. They brought back so many memories of riding buses in New Zealand, thanks to that glimpse of, a past life. AERA 2020 is on. So I just need to get from either Camille or Shakisha what happened, because I know they said they were going to make a submission towards AERA 2020. It did not come to the Caribbean SIG. So Camille, I don't know if you have, or if Shakisha has any information of where you sent that, where you sent your...
It's Anna will have to respond to that. Anna, could you come in, because I was away overseas and without a computer. So Anna, could you tell us what happened, because it really was meant to go to that special interest group. Yeah.
It didn't go to that. Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting, because I didn't get that information. So I applied probably to a different SIG. So I wonder if that can be changed from now.
No, it can't be changed. It can't be changed, because the allocations depend on the number of papers that are received.
Right.
If you tell me though what SIG you sent it to, do you know what SIG?
I would have to log in. I would have to log into our account, but I can do that while you guys are still discussing something else.
If you can do that, because
otherwise I'll follow up with you via email.
No, could you do that now, Anna, please?
No,
because we really
I really need to know where it went to.
Okay.
Because what has happened is that every SIG would have sent out all of their papers already to be accepted. And so we have an allocation. We have a specific allocation. But if I know what SIG it went to, we can probably partner or something. Only today I received a request for a partnership. And it may be able to go into that. I don't know, but I have to know what SIG it went to. It can't be, I mean, nothing is impossible, but it's difficult because our allocation is already met. And it was a symposium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
correct.
So if you can let me know where it went, then I could know, then we can see, well, the acceptance or rejections will come out by the end of October.
Okay.
Because we are at the point now where we are doing acceptance and rejections. That needs to be done by tomorrow, and then creating sessions. So I need to know tonight where it is. If I'm to do anything, if I'm to send an email to anybody, I need to know tonight.
Okay, so I'll have a look and let you know just now.
Yes, thank you very much. But AERA 2020 takes place in San Francisco next year, and I really hope that whatever SIG you sent it to, that it has been accepted, and that even though it's not the Caribbean SIG, at least you will be at the conference once it's accepted, and so we could always promote it as program chair. I can promote it as a Caribbean paper outside of the SIG, and have some kind of partnership. But I need that information, please, Annabelle.
Yeah, because the thing is though, Joanne, I'm applying for funding to come to that based on it being part of my Caribbean research methodology scholarship.
Yes, so I mean, at this point, what you want is acceptance, whatever SIG it was. But then you want to certainly partner with the Caribbean SIG if you're going. If it's a full symposium, it means nobody else is presenting with you, and then we could always liaise with whatever SIG or division or whatever you sent it to. But we have very specific slots. We only have we have and it's filled. I mean, tonight I'm going to press the buttons for the final accept and reject.
Well, just hold on until just don't press the button yet.
I still can't do anything. All I can do after that is know what SIG went to, see if they have accepted it, and ask them that we partner with them. That's all I could do.
Fair enough.
At this point. So let's hope wherever you sent it, that it was accepted. But good that it got in. And so certainly as long as it's accepted, looking forward to that presentation. That's what I have to say about AERA 2020. There's also a business meeting. And if you're there, the agenda for the business meeting hasn't yet been decided, and who knows, we could probably have you as one of the speakers. We'll see. That's up to the committee anyway, but I'll keep that in mind.
Thanks a lot, Joya. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Things will fall into place there. I don't know if Tisha is on board because she has to give us a brief little thing on the CRM conference that's happening hopefully next year, 2020, September in Jamaica. Is Shakisha there?
Shakisha, we can't hear you. Shakisha is here.
Sharon sends her apologies. She was unavoidably absent. I spoke to her not too long ago. So she sends her apologies. CRM is 2020 is still on board. It's still in Jamaica, and we're still partnering with the department. We are to finalize the date, but the idea is to maintain, as with last year, as with the year before, the an option of the first 2 weeks in September. So we're trying to ensure that as much as possible, because this will be the flagship for the conference, that we work within their time frame. So there's no decision on that as yet, but you'll be kept up to date. The information will be sent out via email and via the website as always.
Okay, good.
All right, Shakisha, I could hardly hear you. If you could speak a little bit more into the mic, that's great. All right, so we will forward information on the CRM conference as we get it to you. Hopefully, getting a lot of people to attend in Jamaica, because we expect it to be bigger and more papers this time around. I know Camille would speak to the JEDIC special edition. I know that a paper was published. Camille, you want to tell us just a little bit about that? A recent paper from one of the conference selected papers that we had last year.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. That paper really was a paper that I co-authored with two new emerging researchers. They hadn't really, they were pretty good at putting their stuff in, but the paper was focused on liming, because I remember Barry and a few others had thought about it. Is liming a method or what it is? And I wanted to make the point that liming was a methodology and old talk was the method in the oral tradition of sharing knowledge. And liming was the methodology because it tells you how you are going to carry research, the world you have informed, the theoretical frame underpinnings of it was more for contextualizing the method that we're going to use to share that knowledge. And so we just wrote a paper on that, so that anybody coming on, and, because there's always a thing about, and a lot of researchers don't know the difference between methodology and method. And so it was about explaining that difference for new researchers or old researchers probably know, but also to particularize liming as the methodology and old talk the method within that.
All right, so Camille, thanks for that. I think it was Valerie. Someone asked for the links to all of these papers that have been published and so, and we'll have that up. So this is one of the newest publications from the JEDIC Special Edition, and I would encourage you all to read it. One of the authors of this publication is a very young researcher. Okay, so we come to the point of any other business. Is there anything else that anybody would like to suggest as we move forward? And so?
Just now, Shakisha, Carol wants to say hello to you, Shakisha. Yeah, no.
Sorry, I get Christian.
Yeah, we should get Christian because there's a climate change big rally going down on the road down there.
Shakisha.
Okay, this is a...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
No,
I'm sorry,
part of this
you want me to
conversation.
speak to something?
No, we're just asking if there's any other business. If not, Shakisha will give the thanks and we'll wrap up. Anybody would like to put forward any other ideas you'd like us to discuss? If not, you can always think about it. As I said, following this forum, we would give a synopsis of what has transpired in moving forward. So
I just want to say that the recordings of the last forum is on the website as well as the chat street, and we'll do the same with this one here too.
All right, so before Shakisha comes in, great to see all of you here, my past UTT colleagues and everyone. I know that about 9 persons had signed in from UTT, and I just saw about 3 of us, so hopefully the others would join us next time around. Valerie, I know both of us have to have a conversation soon, so looking forward to that. Yeah. So thanks for everyone, and on to Shakisha now, who will give the vote of thanks and wrap up. Thank you.
I'm not sure if we noted this, but we did have some apologies. Did we start off with that? We have apologies from Heather, Jamal, and Natalie. So we need to note that because they did tender their apologies. Outside of that, I just want to thank each person: Camille, Veronica, Valerie, Susan, Annabelle, Joyanne, Margaret, of course, for chairing. Have I missed anyone? I hope I have not. I just want to thank you all for coming, for the commitment, because you were there in the beginning and you're here again. So thank you for the commitment and for participating and contributing to a very enriching discussion. I think we're each taking from this a lot of things to ponder on and to do our own research and to start to document. Let's take on the challenge that Camille gave us in terms of that publication. I'm sure she'll send out something in that regard. But also in terms of our own, in our own spaces to start, if we haven't started as it, or to continue to do the things, to apply some of the things that we are discussing here so that we can create the change, whether it's in terms of language or the methodology, whatever it is, and to start to have conversations with others so that the next time we meet, more persons will be a part of this discourse. I am not sure of the timelines for the next session. I don't know if Margaret or Camille would speak to that, but it was a pleasure, as it has always been, to have persons here from really across the globe. When you look at it, the different countries that are represented here and the persons who have expressed an interest as well, even though they are not here, it tells me that we are doing something that can and will make a difference. So thank you once again for coming and for spending the time. Anna, for doing this while being on a bus, coming off the bus
All
and
right.
getting back on the bus.
And as they say in the movies, a final word from the chairman of the board. Camille, you're on. Not hearing you, Camille.
Before Camille comes on, Shakisha, please tell Saran I missed her.
I will. I sent you a message to say that I will. So when I speak to her again, which should be tomorrow, I'll ensure to tell her.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks everybody for coming again. I don't know what time it is over there, sometime in the evening, and you at least you get somebody to cook your dinner for you. But if all of us can attend ARA, And if you can also think about the CRM conference in Jamaica, we'll be sending out for abstracts and stuff to be sent in to start saving your money. It will be as the timeline Shakisha said. And I just want to thank Margaret for being an excellent chair and facilitator. She always does a great job with that, always comes really well prepared. So thanks for that. She must have taken that from her mother. Certainly not her little sister. But great job, dear Margaret. If you could
Thank you, and that's for my little sister and my mama.
True. We had to put that in. But if everybody could talk about that and encourage, let people know about the CRM conference. We like a lot more people this time. The energy there was fantastic. You could have that again. And I will hold to what I was saying and see what I could pull out from the recording to put something in a paper with all of us here as co-authors. If you're all in agreement. If not, that's all right. Let me know. Yeah.
Yes, and we send it out. That would be a good paper.
Sorry, I have one question. Is our website available? Can I share it with my master's qualitative student?
Yeah, I send the link to you. Look on the chat.
All right.
Right here, you see that? Look the chat there.
Is it the same link? I'm not seeing it.
It's correct. That's just put in Caribbean methodologies. It's it.
And so we can share that with the master's students. I can give them an opportunity to look at it.
Yeah, and I want to say thanks to Anna because she's the one setting up. She looks after the website first. Yeah, send the link because that have all the links to the papers and stuff.
Okay, great. I'll do that. Yes. Caribbean. Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone. Safe
night.
Journey. Traveling.
Night. See you guys.
Bye all. Nice to see you all. Bye.
Okay.